Hi, this is Dr. Schaus, and today we're going to talk about citizen science. First, we'll talk about what it is, then we'll talk about some bird observation examples, and then examples of water quality testing, including using stream invertebrates to infer water quality. So what is citizen science? It's the involvement of the public in scientific research, where citizens who don't necessarily have extensive scientific background can actually collect useful data in the areas around them and then provide that to scientists. This allows scientists to have more people out in the field collecting data, and then they have a bigger sample size from which to draw an inference. A good example of this using birds is the Audubon Society's Christmas bird count. This was started almost 120 years ago as an alternative to annual Christmas hunts where people tried to hunt as many species as they could in a day. Now groups of volunteers go out and they try to see as many bird species as they can within a 24-hour period. And so this idea has spread across the United States and in many other countries, and now we have data, geographically tied data from volunteers, groups of volunteers that just like going out and counting birds, but they take their observations and upload it to a national and international data set. In this class, we're going to be using the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology's Celebrate Urban Birds program. Birds are found in lots of different habitats, including in cities, out in the country, in parks, and so you're going to select an area near you. It could be in your backyard, it could be in a local park, someplace where you'd like to go several times to watch birds. Select an area that's about 50 feet by 50 feet, and visit the site 3 times. Each time record all the birds you see in your plot for 10 minutes. And so it'll be a total of a half an hour worth of bird observations. And then you'll take your data and upload it to their website. They have information that will help you identify the birds, and they can then use your sightings to help record changes in bird abundance over time. Are some birds increasing in abundance? Are some birds in decline? And they've actually used some of their backyard bird programs to track the spread of disease, such as the house finch, which is in the upper right-hand corner. They track the spread of avian conjunctivitis, or pink eye, in this particular species using the backyard bird programs. A good example of taking water quality measurements using volunteers is what's known as a Secchi dip-in. This volunteer here is holding a Secchi disc, which is a black and white disc that's weighted and attached to a tape measure or a string that has the distance marked off on it. This is dropped down in the water until the algae and other particles in the water make it so that it disappears. The deeper it goes, the cleaner the water is. The shallower it is, the more pollutants there are, the more algae there is in the system, the more turbidity there is in the system. So volunteers that commit to sampling at least once a month during the warm season can get a free Secchi disc from their state in many areas. And they just have to promise to go out, collect data, and then upload data to a statewide website. In this class, we're going to be using water quality testing kits, one of which actually has the turbidity. You'll recognize the Secchi disc pattern here. We're going to use a smaller scale turbidity to get a rough approximation of those sort of measures. We're also going to be measuring the pH of the water, nitrates, phosphates, biological oxygen demand, the presence of fecal coliform bacteria, or the absence of it, hopefully, and a number of other water quality parameters. The difference between this and citizen science is, in this class, we're not going to upload our data, but you can see how, with a simple kit like this, regular citizens could collect meaningful biological information. An example of this where they do use volunteers is the Florida Lake Watch. So as the logo shows, they have citizens go out and measure the Secchi depth in lakes across the state and provide their findings to a statewide database. But they go one step further and they have these volunteers do careful collections of water samples. And there they'll take it, they'll measure out a known volume, run it through a filter, and save the algae that are trapped on the filter for chlorophyll measurements. Then they'll take the water that passed through the filter and they can measure that for dissolved nutrients and have a reputable water quality lab conduct those measurements. So this has contributed to an extensive database within a number of different lakes in Florida, and so this provides state managers with an opportunity to look for long-term trends in water quality and supplement state collected data with citizen collected data. And finally, macroinvertebrate sampling. So macro means large, and invertebrate means they don't have a backbone. So these are the bugs and the worms that live at the bottom of a stream. And clean water systems tend to have characteristic species associated with them, such as mayflies, stoneflies, and caddisflies, whereas polluted water systems will have midges, rat-tailed maggots, leeches, things like that in those areas. So the idea is that if you sample the invertebrates in this area, you can infer how good the water quality is. So let me give you an example of how organisms can be used as indicators of ecosystem health. In this example, the stream flows from the left-hand side where it's fairly clean and clear, past a sewage pipe that dumps raw sewage into the system, and from there it takes a while where the water quality is degraded, but ultimately downstream the system can clean or clear itself. Upstream, the dissolved oxygen level is high and the biological oxygen demand is low. This is a measure of how much oxygen is used up by pollutants like our sewage here. And so you can see it spikes at the point where the pipe dumps the sewage into the stream. At that point, there's a lot of waste that can be broken down, and as a result, as you go downstream, you start to see the dissolved oxygen levels drop until it reaches what's called the septic zone, where there's no oxygen left for fish, and fish are completely absent. Ultimately, the biological oxygen demand, or BOD, drops down and recovers, and then at that point the oxygen levels can rise, and in the decomposition zone and the recovery zone you have a biological community that's different from the clean water ones upstream and downstream. You have pollution tolerant species like carp, gar, and leeches, and in the septic zone it's completely absent of fish and you just get sludge worms and bacteria. So in this way, if you know something about the organisms that live in that area, you can make inferences on how clean the system is. One good example that does this is something called an index of biotic integrity. It's basically a point system based on the number of species and the types of species that you see in local streams. And it has to be standardized locally based on the types of organisms that you find there. Low pollution tolerant organisms, the sensitive species such as are shown at the top, these are ones that give you more points. The ones in the middle, like damselflies and dragonflies, they can live in clean systems, but they can also tolerate a little bit of pollution or slightly low oxygen levels. And so they're worth kind of an intermediate number of points. And then the ones at the bottom, the rat-tailed maggots, the leeches, the mosquito larvae, etc., tend to live in highly polluted areas, and so they're only worth a low number of points. You go out to your local stream, you sample that in a standardized way that either scientists can do as a part of a research study or volunteers can do as long as they're following the accepted protocol, and they can collect water quality data by inferring the health of the ecosystem from the types and the number of different species that you see within that particular stream. It's a pretty good approach. For more information on citizen science, including bird counts and water quality data and indices of biotic integrity collected in this way, check out these links. Thanks.